The Donkey Kong franchise was never hotter than it was in the 1990s, and it seemed like every game based around Mario's first rival was destined for success during that time. While Donkey Kong was already a recognizable name in gaming thanks to the immense success of the original Donkey Kong arcade cabinets, 1994 was the year things really started to take off for the Kong family thanks to the Super Nintendo's breakout hit, Donkey Kong Country. However, several months before this all-time classic made its way onto store shelves, another Donkey Kong game was released for the Game Boy that, while successful in its own right, has flown largely under the radar for the past 30 years. Donkey Kong, which we'll refer to from here on out as Donkey Kong 94, is a puzzle platformer for the Game Boy that unfortunately never got the attention and love that it deserved because it was overshadowed by a series that many consider to be one of the greatest of all time. This unfortunate reality led to a truly phenomenal game being severely underappreciated for the better part of the last 3 decades, but with its spiritual successor Mario vs. Donkey Kong set to make a comeback, there isn't a better time to shine a spotlight on this underrated gem. The reality is that DK94 has an argument as not only the best Donkey Kong game in the franchise, but as the best game released on the Game Boy as well. By introducing a ton of new mechanics that expanded the original Donkey Kong arcade gameplay, this sequel feels like a natural evolution for the series that still feels unique to this day. By exploring what would happen if Donkey Kong wasn't defeated during the events of the first game, you are taken through over 100 finely crafted levels as you execute tight jumps and solve puzzles in an attempt to rescue Pauline once again. From beginning to end, this title delivers an engaging experience that is notable for its smooth difficulty curve, creative concepts, and influence on the larger Mario universe, and in this video I want to highlight a game that I consider a must-play for any fan of Mario platformers. I really hope you enjoy this look into the forgotten classic that is Donkey Kong 94. DK94 is likely the best Donkey Kong game that you've never played or even heard of for that matter, and yet it has influenced the Mario franchise more than you probably know. From debuting Donkey Kong's now iconic tie to introducing new moves to Mario's arsenal that would later become staples of the franchise, Donkey Kong 94 was truly innovative for its time. One of its most impressive aspects is how many concepts it packed into one game, as the gameplay never feels dull or repetitive at any point during this 10-world adventure. You are constantly being asked to utilize different parts of Mario's toolkit to progress, and it keeps things captivatingly fresh throughout. Like in the original Donkey Kong, Mario will be asked to climb ladders, perform tough jumps, and destroy enemies and obstacles with hammers, but that's only scratching the surface of what he can and will do in Donkey Kong 94. Debuting for the first time is Mario's ability to do backflips and handstands, the latter of which actually introduces the first version of Mario's iconic triple jump 2 years before the launch of Super Mario 64, and each move really transforms how you approach platforming in a 2D space. In addition to these maneuvers, Mario can swing from wires, create platforms and ladders, pull levers, swim, block falling objects, bounce off springs, climb up ropes, and pick up and throw objects, just to name a few actions. The depth of control is remarkable for a game so early into both Mario and Donkey Kong's history, and what's incredible is the game actually gives you all these tools from the start, which allows you to do things like this. There's even a cutscene that plays showing all of Mario's moves off if you don't press anything on the title screen, and while this can seem overwhelming at first, DK94 does a tremendous job of gradually easing new players into its ideas so they can get acclimated to each mechanic individually. It accomplishes this through short little segments that show the player what obstacles they should expect in their next few levels, and also how to overcome them. These short demonstrations are crucial to the slow build and complexity that occurs over the course of DK94's 100 plus levels, and add a ton of charm to the experience. You then play a level where you must use the new skill introduced to get comfortable with it before it's combined with concepts you're already familiar with in another level, to then test your mastery of the idea in a final level before moving on to a boss fight with Donkey Kong. This is the core gameplay loop of DK94, and it works so well because the game always ensures you've had enough time and practice with its different mechanics before allowing you to move on. This creates a strong sense of progression as you feel you are always growing and being challenged by something new as the difficulty organically builds throughout the adventure. It gives Donkey Kong 94 one of the smoothest difficulty curves you'll find in a platformer, as even if you end up with a surplus of lives in those first few worlds, by the game's end there's a good chance you'll be hanging onto your last few to try and avoid a game over. DK94 really tests your knowledge and execution of all the game's mechanics in its final few worlds, and completing them feels great because you don't feel like you're being blindsided with a random difficulty spike. Instead, you feel prepared because the game does an effective job at teaching you everything you will need to know, and provides an abundance of extra lives in the earlier, easier stages that will encourage you to keep trying when things get tough. It also helps that unlike Mario vs. Donkey Kong, where bringing a key to a door unlocks a second room, every stage in DK94 is a single screen, making each difficult level more approachable. It helps the flow of the game because as long as you don't repeatedly fail, you won't ever be stuck on one stage for too long. Of course, that doesn't mean there won't inevitably be at least one stage that trips you up, but it doesn't feel as bad as other games can because progression is fairly quick in Donkey Kong 94. With multiple opportunities to save in each world, you're only ever a few short levels away from your next checkpoint, and it improves the pacing of the game tremendously by persuading you to never give up. And on the other hand, it alleviates some of the burnout you might experience with 101 total levels, as you never feel obligated to play more than a few minutes at a time, which makes the overall experience more digestible. This makes it easier to keep a clear mind and deal with the natural frustrations that come from any platforming game, which allows you to appreciate the other positive qualities that Donkey Kong 94 has to offer. Without that ability, it'd be difficult to value the game's endearing cutscenes and smaller details, like how the charming little mini-maps are surprisingly effective at adding to the game's sense of adventure. I wish Mario vs. Donkey Kong would have copied this idea, and I hope in the remake they are able to make progression at least as immersive as it is in DK94, because it's nice to have visual representations of your progress. You really feel like you've chased Donkey Kong around the entire world by the time you reach the game's final level, and it's impressive how these short cutscenes and static screens aid in painting that picture. In particular, I want to highlight the tower, DK94's final world, because I think seeing yourself ascend up it really helps to sell the finality of the end of the game. You can see with each completed level that Donkey Kong has nowhere left to run, and it makes the world feel like a true final stand for the big stubborn ape. The fact that DK teams up with Donkey Kong Jr. during the tower's first half really reinforces that sentiment, as it feels like Donkey Kong is pulling out all the stops to try and prevent Mario from reuniting with Pauline. It builds tension for the climactic final battle, and grants it a strong atmosphere that helps it stand out from other boss levels in the game. Speaking of boss levels, they deserve credit for allowing the player to have those moments of reprieve in the first place. Being able to save after each one lets you take a step back to enjoy DK94's excellent design, because you are granted the peace of mind that all your hard work won't be undone if you do happen to struggle and get a game over later on. As a result, boss levels in Donkey Kong 94 are rewarding, cathartic levels where you get to give DK a taste of his own medicine instead of tough, punishing challenges that need to be feared. Their straightforward nature that plays more like the original Donkey Kong makes them comparatively easy next to stages centered around puzzle solving, and they help break up the standard gameplay of bringing a key to a locked door. Of course, this is until you get to the tower, where the challenge definitely picks up, and where every stage is a boss level of some variety. 9-8 in particular has always stood out to me, not just for its incredible boss theme, which is my favorite music track in the game, but for how conclusive it feels. The intense atmosphere is incredible, and you really feel like your journey is about to come to an end when you nail DK with that final barrel. However, in true stubborn Donkey Kong fashion, he isn't quite ready to give up, which leads Mario into a unique and somewhat grueling final boss fight to save Pauline atop the tower that gives off serious King Kong vibes. To me, this fake out encapsulates what makes Donkey Kong 94 a great game, because it shows how you can never fully predict where DK94 is going to take you. It demonstrates how instead of shying away from its inspirations, Donkey Kong 94 instead uses them to subvert your expectations. All the way up until its final moments, Donkey Kong 94 remains committed to this idea, and it keeps the adventure engaging the whole way through. Whether it's the beginning few stages tricking you into thinking DK94 will be just like its arcade predecessor, the structure of the game fooling you into believing 9-8 is the final level, or how your view of platforming is constantly being flipped on its head thanks to the influx of new ideas and mechanics, Donkey Kong 94 is always doing something to keep you on your toes. I think without playing the game for yourself, it can be difficult to appreciate just how impressive this 30-year-old Game Boy game truly is. There is so much variety between levels, and the challenge is consistently fair that the game truly never feels stale at any point throughout the adventure. In one level, you'll be utilizing strong winds to cross otherwise uncrossable paths. In another, you'll be required to manipulate enemy positions so you can use them as platforms. And in some stages, you'll be forced to practically design the level yourself in order to progress. You'll have to deal with slippery platforms made of ice that make dodging hazards more difficult, conveyor belts that must be used to transport objects through areas you can't reach, and in some instances you'll have to purposefully get hit by poison mushrooms so you can become small enough to collect otherwise unreachable items. Other levels might contain disintegrating platforms, underwater sections, or the classic Donkey Kong elevators, and still we haven't covered all the different elements that this game contains. With that in mind, Donkey Kong 94, for all it offers, is not a perfect game and definitely shows its age in certain areas. Obviously, this is a game restricted by the Game Boy's color palette, and unless you are using a Super Game Boy like shown in my footage, it really makes the game feel dated. Similarly, the Game Boy's musical capabilities were so limited that it's easy to feel how these songs were held back by its hardware. As a fan of 8-bit music and chiptunes, it truthfully doesn't bother me too much, but if you've ever heard reimagined versions of these songs, it's hard to not feel like many of the tracks weren't fully realized. Aside from technical limitations, there are a few design choices that feel dated as well, like how the game kicks you back to the level select screen after each death instead of respawning Mario at the level starting point. This might not seem like a big deal at first, but as soon as you reach a level that gives you some trouble, it becomes noticeable as it's frustrating to have to sit through the entire Donkey Kong jingle while you wait for another opportunity to try the stage again. Even with these few drawbacks and all the similarities to its more famous successor Mario vs. Donkey Kong, DK94 still manages to create a unique experience that is worth going back to if you've never played it. By combining elements from Donkey Kong Jr. for the arcade, Super Mario Bros. 2, and even Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, DK94 is able to form something totally original that enhances the legacy of both the Donkey Kong and Super Mario franchises. It's somewhat ironic that many people have skipped over this game because of its misleading name, because Donkey Kong 94 has a distinct identity that is unmistakable to anyone who's played it before. DK94 has so much personality, a ton of unique enemies, and several mechanics that puzzlingly haven't been seen since, and it's a shame more people haven't been exposed to it. If you haven't been convinced to try this game yet, let me wrap up by sharing a few of my favorite Donkey Kong 94 details to show you why this game is so endearing to me. I love, for example, how the final world, the tower, can be seen in various backgrounds throughout the game and actually gets larger and larger as you progress closer to it. They absolutely didn't have to put that much effort into something few people probably even noticed, but I think it shows how well crafted DK94 is. I also really enjoy how we get to see Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. team up against Mario in this game, kind of like how we'd see Bowser and Bowser Jr. team up in later Super Mario games. And finally, I'm very fond of the final cutscene before the credits, where it seems that our journey has taken us from the real world to the Mushroom Kingdom, implying that this adventure is the link that takes us from the original Donkey Kong into the very first Super Mario Bros. Frankly, it is a travesty that more people haven't been exposed to Donkey Kong 94, because you will be hard-pressed to find another title on the Game Boy that comes close to matching the quality found here. Aside from a lone re-release on the now defunct 3DS eShop, DK94 has never been available on hardware other than the platform it was released on, and it really doesn't make sense to me why Nintendo has kept this classic title under wraps for as long as it has. DK94 is a rare example of a first-party Nintendo game that can legitimately be referred to as a hidden gem, and I can only hope that the renaissance of Mario vs. Donkey Kong can bring this game the love and admiration it should have been getting for the past 3 decades. With great boss levels, fantastic pacing, innovative gameplay, and a smooth difficulty curve, DK94 is genuinely one of the best Mario or Donkey Kong games I've ever played, and I hope I've done my part in bringing attention to a truly wonderful title. But I'm curious to hear what you all think. Have you heard of or played Donkey Kong 94 before, or is this the first time you're finding out about it? And if you have played it, let me know what you did or didn't love about DK94 down in the comments. And of course, if you like this video, be sure to like the video, subscribe, and click the bell to turn on notifications so you can be alerted whenever I release a new video. Thanks for watching.